Well, there is a breaking news story this week, and for once, it's really nice for me to be able to report some good news. And there was a foiled potential mass shooting attack this past weekend. I want to take you through the story. So, in Virginia, we had a 35-year-old man who was arrested at the Park Valley Church in Haymarket, Virginia. And this occurred during the Sunday service, just as the congregation were about to gather. Like I said, this is literally just happened this past week. I want to break it down a little bit for us. So the foiled attack was at the Park Valley Church. It was actually uncovered when a local resident from the church, observed disturbing Instagram posts and immediately notified the police. So they didn't hesitate. They didn't challenge themselves and say, is this a joke? Am I really seeing this? Immediately, they called the police. They saw the urgency of the matter. And then the suspect had posted many troubling images of himself pointing guns. And we saw this in the Charleston mass murderer. We've seen this in so many others. We actually saw this in the Sutherland Springs shooting, where the assailant posted pictures of himself with weapons online prior to the attack. So, as my good friend Dr. James Densley says, what do these mass murderers do? They study other mass murderers. We see some similar behaviors here. And again, remember, this is a forward attack. Now, the success comes down to the quick tip from the member of the public, but also the rapid communication between police departments. And we saw a complete change here from Uvalde, where police were perhaps hesitant or they thought it was a hostage situation. They immediately started to work together, went straight to the scene of this potential mass shooting, and very quickly they were able to identify the assailants. So their response, the quickness of the police response, definitely played a crucial role in thwarting this deadly attack at this church in Virginia. So let's talk a little bit about the arrest now. So we know that a concerned member of the public saw some distressing social media posts, someone in a crisis, someone is troubled. They reached out calling 911. We know that the police immediately went to the scene. They took the incident as incredibly serious, as we'd expect them to. They located the individual and then they arrested the assailant. Now, the assailant was found with a loaded pistol, extra ammunition, and knives inside the church. So, I want to make a few assumptions here now, and I know you as my listeners, you always drift the conversation towards the backpack in church. Now, I've got to make some assumptions. One of those assumptions is that he must have had some type of bag with him. So we'll save that for another day surrounding, do we search bags, do we not? But the fact that he had a loaded pistol, extra ammunition, and knives says to me perhaps that he has some type of bag with him. So again, we've got to consider, what does that look like at your house of worship in relation to people being in backpacks and various different items inside the church? What we also saw in this forward attack is the discovery of an alarming, what they call a kill manifesto. Now, only 18 months ago, we had a transgender assailant at a Presbyterian Covenant school in Nashville, where they had a manifesto. Who else had a manifesto? The Charleston mass murderer had a manifesto. A guy called Kyle Odom, who tried to take the life of Pastor Tim Remington in 2017, he had a manifesto. And again, remember, one of the four things that these active assailants have in common is that they go online, they get radicalized in the deepest, darkest parts of the internet, and they're writing manifestos. They're telling their story through their manifestos. So what we're seeing here in this forward attack is the pattern, is the pathway to violence. So he was arrested with his items on him. Now, I want to cover what are some of those human behaviors and indicators, because I, like most people that work in threat analysis, do not believe that people just snap. There is a pathway to violence. There are pre-indicators. There are always behaviors that tell us that someone is potentially going down that pathway to violence. And what do we see here? Well, we saw these suspicious social media posts depicting firearms and vague threats were major red flags. If someone suddenly starts making threats towards someone and that isn't their personality, that isn't their nature, listen, understand, take time to work out what does that mean. And the other human behaviors that we had is that the concerned citizen immediately alerted the police after seeing these disturbing posts. So there's always these pre-behaviors. In this particular case, so far where we are, we know there was these social media posts where his behavior was very much out of the ordinary. And in relation to human behaviors and indicators, and we also saw very early monitoring. What we do know right now in this story is that the church safety team were already monitoring this individual independent of what had gone on social media. So the unusual attire and behavior. And again, who wore unusual attire? Virginia Tech, Columbine, the First Baptist Church, we came in dressed all in dark clothing, wearing bullet-resistant clothing. So there's always these human behaviors. So it's great here to see the safety team immediately went into action independently of what had been seen outside. So what are some key learnings and takeaway for us? Well, we saw the public cooperation. To see something, say something is incredibly important. In a house of worship, sometimes we can say, well, am I judging that person because they're different than me? How am I going to be perceived if I raise a flag? Is their behavior being out of the ordinary? Don't do that. If you see something, come from that position of Christ, tell someone what you've seen, discuss it and work through the problem. The other strong key takeaway is that we saw great interagency cooperation. As soon as this call came in, numerous police departments worked together to try and resolve this situation. We also saw the importance of security measures. Yes, we know this church had a safety team. Yes, we know they'd already observed the person's human behaviors and they were monitoring the individual. I would like them to go one step further and do what I call a conversational interview. Engage that person, welcome them to the church. My name is Simon. What brings you here today? Try and use questioning to determine intent. Intent is where we find the unusual activity. The intent is where we find those harmful people. So great security measures at the church, but let's engage them with conversational interview, and we've got to be proactive. The last thing is, again, the vigilance and preparedness. We saw that raising the alarm early, being bold, being prepared to say this does not appear right, in this instance, saved the day. And it's not very often that I can talk about these deadly attacks where we've actually foiled them. So I just want to come in very quickly and take you through that incident. I'll drop a link to the article. Like I said, this only happened 4 days ago, so it's all very new and fresh, but so much information, so much learning about this Thwarted attack. So my question for you is, what would you do if this happened at your church? How would you respond? Do you have the safety measures in place to make sure that if this type of situation occurred, you would know how to resolve it? So leave your comments below and I shall see you next time. Take care, everybody.